Hello, everyone. I'll wait for everybody to get their headphones on so you can hear. I'm happy to introduce Steve Hill, who's going to tell you all about SAS CI 360 and connecting data to decision. Anyway, Steve.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. As a native Texan, I also feel I need to welcome you to Innovate Here and also say, buckle up y'all, we're fixing to get into it. As he said, my name is Steve Hill and I have the pleasure of leading our Software as a Service engineering division here at SAS. And I am really excited to talk to you today about the two newest modules that we're adding to CI 360, Marketing AI and Marketing Decisioning. But before we get into the details on those, I want to start with a high-level overview of CI 360 in case this is new to any of you. CI 360 is our software as a service customer engagement platform that's designed to connect your data, your decisions, and your delivery. It starts with building your audiences from all kinds of sources. And then you can create and execute multi-step customer journeys that connects your messages to those audiences and delivers it over any of the destination channels that we support. Whether that's our native web, mobile, or email capabilities, using our out-of-the-box integration to your social media advertising accounts, or leveraging our custom connector framework to integrate with your existing MarTech stack. And it's on top of these fundamental capabilities that we're adding these two new components. Now, for Marketing AI, that means data modeling and batch scoring. And look, I know it's the first full day here to Innovate, and your AI buzzword bingo cards may already be getting full, but I promise this is a little bit of a different story. This is all about how we apply analytics through a use case that's tailored, a user experience, that's tailored to the marketing use cases and the marketing users in your organization, using technology that leverages the data that you already have and provides AI-driven insights throughout the process. So our goal here is to dramatically shorten the amount of time it takes to deploy new models. As we know that data scientists often spend up to 80% of their time preparing data. Now, whether that's writing SQL code, joining tables, performing imputations, calculations, aggregations, none of that has innate value, but the magic can't happen until you have a properly formatted analytical base table, or ABT. So we started by asking ourselves, how could we make that process more automated and user-friendly so that we can get more people to participate in the process of generating that data, training models, and outputting data. So we can free up the data scientists in your organization to focus on the more novel or complex challenges that they have also in their backlog. Speaking of that data, another critical factor for this solution is that we don't require you to give us your data to use it. We bring the execution to your environment, but we still provide the same application through our always on, always up to date services, just like the rest of CI 360. For marketing decisioning, we're providing a way for you to crank out real-time next best action agents that can work in your local environment. So just like with Marketing AI, the execution happens in your account where your data is so that you can remain in control of the data and the systems that it's interacting with. And also like Marketing AI, we do this through a streamlined user experience that's focused on use case templates and guided workflows. And because we can handle the deployment of those local agents for you, you can focus on the business problem and not the technical administration. All right, so we're gonna go through a churn prevention campaign demo here where I'm gonna use Marketing AI to create some churn risk scores that can be used to generate an audience that powers a journey and some eligibility rules for a decision. And then we'll look at how you'll be able to, in the future, use a next best action scoring model to arbitrate those decisions in real time. All right, so for me as a user, the first step is to create a recipe. Now there's two parts for Marketing AI. There's projects and recipes. Recipes represent the data preparation portion of this process. And this is how you can create one set of data that can be sliced up and used in multiple projects. Recipe templates are specific to a use case. They contain all of the instructions and parameters that are required for that type of model. So today I'm going to focus on the likelihood to churn model, which along with propensity to purchase are going to be what's available at launch. Instead of you watching me type through all of this and fill it out and crunch the data, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit and open a recipe where I've already filled out some things, and I'll walk you through that. So you'll see in this example, we are calculating churn for accounts. So the first thing I have to do is tell it where the accounts are. And so for that, I'm going to use the SAS Bank Data Mart that's been set up as a data source in CI360 that contains all of the tables and columns that I need for this problem. And in the account table, there's the account ID, that's my key. Now, churn models also require a start date for your accounts, since that's what we're working with. And so I've also gone in and selected the date opened from that same table. The next step is the sources, where you'll see the source I just picked for my account data. But I could also go in and bring in multiple different sources. For example, I could choose my campaign history table. And the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed there's different icons here. This is in Google BigQuery, whereas my data is in Snowflake. So you can pull data from different data platforms together, and it will all get processed by Marketing AI. Now, there's two options here for each data source. The first option, to refine data, you can go in and turn off any fields that you don't think are appropriate to be used in the modeling process or that might incorrectly influence the result. You can also go in and use the columns in that data source to build some filters to include or exclude certain records. So for example, the SAS Bank has decided to exit the market in California, so I'm excluding those records from my recipe so that they also don't influence the model in the future. Now this next step for churn predictors is where we start getting into some of the data science stuff. So I'm going to take a minute here and point out these explain bubbles that you've maybe seen throughout the process. These tips, like why choose this or why this matters or what AI thinks, are how we work on turning things that are important to data scientists, but maybe need to be explained for the users of the software in a different way, but we keep both sets of language there so everybody knows what's going on. And in here, it tells me that for these churn predictors, it's already selected the most common aggregations and transformations for my numeric fields, where it's going to do all these things, my categorical fields, where it'll run these functions, and then for my date time fields, it's going to do this for all of them. I could pick specific columns if I needed to, or none of them. Now, population filters are really one of the most powerful ways that we can turn one recipe into many modeling opportunities in the project step. And you'll see here I've already created 3 populations: my active customers, my checking account holders, which are those with an account type equal to checking, and then I've done the same thing for my savings account holders. So these populations are going to show up when we go to generate tables as different parts of the possible output. Now, for churn models, I also need to tell it, what does churn look like for me? And you can create multiple churn definitions here. I've created one for account closure, which is simply the existence of a date closed. So when it's looking at the data that I have, if it sees historical data closed, then it knows that that's an example of churn that it can learn from. You can also add more complex churn definitions with events like less than $50 in your checking account and no transactions in the last 6 months. So you can find different ways to express churn. And if you create multiple churn definitions, when we create the data at the end, there'll be different tables for those. So you can compare in your modeling results which churn definition has sort of the results you want, or you can use them for entirely different purposes. Next up are time frames. I have to tell the model, well, in what time frame are you asking about churn? Otherwise, it's kind of like asking how long is a piece of string, right? So I'm saying here through these two different time frames, I'm going to be calculating churn risk for the next 30 days and churn risk for the next 60 days. Right, my data is now ready to be prepared just through that simple guided process. And I can come in here and click on Generate Tables, and you'll see there's this combination of the populations, the churn definition, and the time frame. And this is how we get all those different sources that we can use for creating different models. So imagine if you have populations down to small regional locations or specific products that customers are interested in. Now, I would choose all of those and click Start Generating, but I don't want to spend the time right now. This one has already done that. So now that when I click the Generate button, you would have seen a nice status tracker that shows you the high-level overview of where this process is. But you can always go in, if you are interested in this kind of thing, and see what's happening behind the scenes, where you can see the entire process that's been orchestrated, and you can click on any one of those nodes and see the log for that step. So transparency is key. Now if I come in here and pick all these tables, or for now just a few of them, I can move on because they're ready. Now the next step is my table columns. This is all about what data is going to be in that ABT that I pass on. And you'll see here all the things from my SAS Bank data mart where my admin has already given me nice display names. I can turn some things off if I, again, don't want them to go on. But you'll also see here all of these columns that were created by those churn predictors that are the aggregated transformed columns. And I can come in and give these all better names. I'm not going to do that now, and in fact, we're working on some stuff to make these auto-generated through our Copilot process in the future. So now that I have those columns, I can start talking about how the project is going to be able to use this data. The first step is eligibility options. When you go to create the model score, which of these records do you want to score? Is it only people in a certain geo? Is it only people in a certain type of customer category, et cetera? I'm now going to say these are the columns that I can choose from to use as filters when I go to do that scoring selection. Now, I'm just going to pick the ones that my GenAI Copilot has recommended for me by looking at the data. And those are going to be available, you'll see, in the project. And then because the goal of all of this work is not just to make a score available in your data, it's actually to create some output. We're going to go ahead and say which columns do I want to put as available options when I create my output in the project. Now, this is important because remember, to this point, all the data that we're working with is local in your environment. CI doesn't have it. You are now saying these are the columns that are eligible to be provided to CI for execution at this stage. So that's going to be things like contact information, maybe my email address. It's going to be things that I need for personalization, like first name and last name, or maybe things that will control the flow of a journey because you have a different journey for your loyalty members or by customer type, for example. Or by account type. So now I've defined which columns are options for output. The last step is to choose which attributes should be monitored for fairness whenever we score this model. You'll see how this comes into play more when we look at the model training results. So for now, I am just going to do the same thing, and I'm going to select the recommended columns. And now my data is ready. I can activate this and make it available for a project. The next step then is to create a new project using one of those tables that I just generated. So I can come in here and on the project side, where I'm going to set up the actual model training, scoring, and output process, I would pick the recipe that I just built, and I could choose which of those tables, like my 1 month active customer account closure prediction table. And that's going to be the basis for the model that I'm about to build. I'm going to pull the same trick here and open one that's already been trained so that I can show you this a little quicker. The next step, once you've selected your table, is to go in and talk about the optimization process. Now, what I see here for optimize, what this means is how we determine what a good outcome looks like. This is how we shape the threshold and the prediction that the model is going to make to fit with your business goal. And if I don't know what an F1 score is, spoiler alert, this is not about racing, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I will see right below it friendly language that tells me, oh, this is about the model being balanced between maybe a more aggressive and a more conservative approach to identifying churn risk. And if you go in and look at the methods that are available, you can again use that explain bubble to see, well, why would I choose that? Or why would I choose recall? Or maximizing revenue. So all about explaining this to whoever is using the software in both analytical terms and in marketing terms. So if I just stick with model balance, I can move on and train the model. That's it. We already did the data prep. Took about 60 to 80% of the time. Just wasn't very much. And now I can train the model. And when I do that, it's going to do the same high-level status process with the same ability to view the details. But then it'll give me all this information at the end, right? And that means everything from an explanation from what our AI thinks about the scores and the results and what it means from a marketing and a churn perspective, what threshold really marks where we should consider someone a churn risk based on your data and your optimization selection, the performance of the model, along with a lot of more explanation about what all these things mean in the context of churn and marketing. And so if you heard, this was talked about this morning in the opening session, but SAS's vision is to be the leading data and AI partner, the most trustworthy data and AI partner that powers the world's decisions. And so this degree of explanation of what's going on is very important to us. And that includes our fairness monitoring. And so if you recall, I chose those fairness attributes. It is using those to specifically measure the bias that those may be introducing into your results. And even calling out the impact that it has on certain segments that it saw within the data for those different values. And so it's going to monitor these throughout the life of this project. And I'll show you more on that in a minute. But trustworthiness is about more than just transparency, more than just the fairness, it's also about transparency. And so this isn't a black box. You can see all the data that went into this outcome. And for each record, you can see how these different values affected it, down to the contribution of every single column. So this is all part of being transparent in how we're going about this. So once we understand the data and we understand the model, now we can move on to doing something with it. The next step is our eligibility options, where I can say who should be available for scoring, who in this instance is going to be scored. I can do that for the whole class of customers, or I can do it only for those who are above the threshold. And I can use those attributes that I showed you a minute ago to add some inclusion or exclusion criteria. Right? So for this particular project, I can only score a subset of those customers. That scoring process can then be set up to be run on demand or on a schedule. So maybe this is something I want to run for my team every week. So I've set up a recurring schedule to run weekly and it will always rerun this scoring and output it. And as I said, the ultimate goal here is not generating the data. It's making something that is immediately available for use in your marketing efforts. So that's where the output comes in. And if I go to create a new output, I might choose a 360 audience. And you'll notice I don't have the entire SAS Bank data mart over here on the left. I only have the columns that I said were eligible for attributes. This is how I protect any of that data that I don't want to send to the cloud from going in when you send in the audience that has to be used to deliver the email. So you can go in here and pick those columns that you want to bring. I'm just going to quickly pick all of them. Oops. Helps if I click the right checkbox. And then I can fill out some specific values about this audience, like the name and the description. This is all about customers. And we do have an email column. Now I'm going to keep this audience for up to 10 days. So that means if I run this every week, then at the end of 10 days, if it hasn't been refreshed, it'll disappear from our system. So now I've got an audience. The last step is to set up the monitoring metrics. So this is how we watch this for decay. So we've got some recommended attributes that we're going to monitor to see if this model continues to perform or if we need to retrain it. And by the way, if I need to retrain it, it's just this button right here, right? Pretty straightforward. So you'll see these thresholds that were set up. I can adjust them. I can add additional metrics if I want. And you'll see down here the fairness metrics are specifically being called out. So you can set up thresholds for those fairness monitors so you can be more sensitive to that and be notified if that's becoming a problem in your environment. All right, so now that I have this all in place, let's do something with it, right? We've got the audience. So I'm going to go in here. And I'm going to ask our Journeys agent, which I hope you just saw demonstrated on the Spotlight stage, to take that audience that I created and build me a journey using a couple of email touch points that runs every week that offer $50 if you sign up for direct deposit and escalates to 100 if you don't react. So it's using that search agent under the covers to go find those things, even though I didn't give it the name, I just kind of said what I wanted to do. And so it's going to go look for each of those things, the audience, the email tasks, and it's going to come up with a plan. And once it's determined all the pieces and parts of this, it's going to ask me as the human in the loop, as part of our responsible use of AI, to review the plan. Okay, it found all these things based on my rough description. I can approve that and let it start working. And so it'll open up the Journeys canvas for you. I didn't even go into Journeys. I was still here at the end of my project, right? And it's going to open up that Journeys canvas, start out with the audience, and get to work. Now, while it's pulling all its thoughts together and starting to do that, I'm just going to point out what you saw here. We started with raw data. We automatically created ABTs. We automatically created, trained, and scored a new model and automatically output an audience. And now we're automatically creating a journey that's going to use that to go engage with your customers. So that's really the power of all of this. And as the agent finishes up drawing my canvas here, you'll see all those parts like the email that I asked for, the weight node that's necessary, the splits based on user clicks and behaviors, etc. So let's say we finish this, we've sent it out, but there are some people who just ignored the offer, no matter how good it was, and they decided that they were going to close their account. So they call in, we need a way to handle that in real time. But for that, we need to know what to do when they contact us. So that means we need a different kind of recipe. So now I can come in here, and now keep in mind, this is not there at launch. We're going to be adding this in the integration. It's our very next thing to do. So I'm comfortable telling you a little bit about it now and creating next best offer recipe, which you'll see has a whole bunch of different steps on the left that look different than the churn recipe. So once I've completed all that work, then I can go into a project that's using it. and go to the output, and instead of choosing an audience, I can actually choose to send that to marketing decisioning. And so for that, I'll need a decisioning process where when this request comes in through any of these channels, I will check if the customer's eligible. They must be active and only new within the last year. They can't be new in the last year. We've got some actions. Well, I've got different actions I'm going to take for my high-risk customers versus my medium-risk customers, and the eligibility for that is based on that churn risk score that we just generated in our data. And then the last step, aside from making sure they can only do this once every 6 months and they're not trying to game the system, is to set up the arbitration. So instead of using simple priority or a formula, we're going to use an external scoring table, which is what we just got provided by Marketing AI. All right, told you needed to buckle up. There was a lot there. That is how we see CI360 as the missing link. And if you have more questions or want to look at this in deeper, please come join us over at the CI booth where you can sign up to win an LAFC or a Liverpool jersey. And there's also lots of great customer presentations still coming today and tomorrow. So I hope you'll check those out too. Thank you all very much.